record so that we can record the thing. And I put up, as you probably already know, because you would have looked at YAB, I put up the phase 3 video, that little movie clip, 2 hours and 24 minutes long. That took a lot longer than I thought. So it must be really, really detailed, which means that there's not much work for you to do. So the worrying thing, though, is that only 20, what was it, 40 people out of 76 people have seen it yet.
Yeah.
So we all know what you're doing on the weekend. It's a good thing I can't see who's seen it, so that I can keep in. Yeah, a little is an understatement. But you know what? If I hadn't done the video at 2 hours and 24 minutes, you would have gotten all that information in an hour and 15. I would have just spoken fast, twice as fast, and yeah. What's that, Ben?
It would be twice as lost.
You'll be twice as lost. Now, hopefully, nobody will be lost once they've seen that, because it fits nicely with the stuff we talked about last time. Now, I don't know if there would. I don't know. It might be blue-eyed of me to believe that that there are questions already. But are there? Blue-eyed? Yeah, I am blue-eyed. That means naive. No questions? Well, if that's the case, then I can continue with what we were doing before we stopped doing what we were doing before. If that makes sense. No, yeah. Well, we haven't decided yet. I don't know if you saw the YAP discussion yesterday when I said, I can't remember who it was that asked. Let me just look that up. Although it's virtual now, so nobody can send him stink eye. Deeksha said, when is it due? And I said, when can you have it done by? And then he said, October 6th, maybe, on everybody's behalf. So, well, the 6th is way too soon, you say, but you still have phases 4, 5, and 6, and 4 and 6 are harder than this. So I think that October 6th is good. Yeah, everybody here is nodding as well, but then again, they don't have to do it, so it's easy for them to nod. But yeah, let's go by. Well, yeah, that just means you get a week less. 6 is the most difficult, then 4, then this one, then the other previous 2, and then phase 5 is the easiest one. But type checking takes at least 3 weeks, and code generation, you don't want to have less than 4, and modifier checking is 1, so that's 8 weeks, and we're done on the 11th. So if this one is due on the 6th, then we have a week of fudging, which I think might be necessary. This is week 5 out of 16. Let's get started and talk about it on Monday then, or Tuesday, or whenever it is that I see you people. The next week. So give it a go on the weekend and look at and see how you fare, and then we can talk about it later. Now, what I do have to do is just go back and see how far we got the last time we did this stuff. Right. So we did that. Right. So now I think I'm on the same page as you are. That's good. Right. So we are still talking about parsing. We are now at we're back in chapter 4, so 4.3, which is grammar transformations. Now, sometimes we have a grammar. Actually, let's just do a small little example here to begin with, and you can tell me something about this. So if I say A goes to A, or A. Actually, should we call that a I don't know what the hell that sound was. If I do something like this, then I could ask, is this a context-free grammar? That's a fairly benign question, and we will come to the conclusion that yes, it is. And then I can ask, is it LL1? Well, we know when it's not LL1. So we could try to do the following. We could say, well, what's the first of A, and what's the first of B, and we also need the first of capital A. Well, this one is an easy one. That's just a B. Now I get one of these things that I think one of you actually asked about last week, which was what happens if you get into sort of a loop of sorts, because it looks like I have to compute first A in order to compute the first of A little a. So if I want to compute this, I need the first of that. That's this guy. Well, what's that equal to? Well, that's equal to the first of A and the first of B, and that definitely has a B in it, right? Now, if I look at all strings, so I might have to just sort of consider what this language looks like. At some point, that A must become a B, or otherwise I would have infinitely long sentential forms and no strings in the language at all, and that doesn't work. So it could be B A, it could be B A A, B A A A, etc. So basically, it's a B A plus language. So the first of this guy here is also a B, and it actually turns out that this is an equal. Well, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Right. So now I have the intersection of these two, which is B, which is not the empty set. That means definitely that it's not LL1. So that means that we can't parse this with just a look ahead and leftmost derivation and all that stuff that we saw last time. But could I do anything about it so that it could turn into it's a sheep language. Very funny. It is funny, isn't it?
It is pretty funny.
So can we do something about it? So can we change the language? Actually, not the language. The grammar to produce the same language but such that it is LL1. Well, let's see. We need to find a grammar that does something like that. Well, that shouldn't be too terribly bad, right? Because that's just a B followed by a bunch of A's, right? So what if I said, I'm going to call it A prime now. A prime goes to a B, and then actually I'll call that one A, and then I'll use an A prime on this one here, because after that B, I just need as many A's as I want. And in order to avoid getting into trouble later, I think I'm going to do it this way: A prime or epsilon.
Move the play pause button. Move your mouse off of the. There you go.
What, can you see that?
They can see that.
Oh. I hope that doesn't get recorded. No,
It
probably
doesn't get
wouldn't.
recorded, but it's in the, well...
Who knows? I guess we'll find out. So let me just actually grab this. So this becomes actually, let's just do one other thing as well. Move that here and do that like that. And so what we could do is we could certainly say, in general, and actually, so before we do that, just take a quick look at what we have here. Why is this a problem, right? Why does this go wrong? Well, it goes wrong because we have immediate left recursion. Turns out that LL1 parsers don't like left recursion. So what I do when I rewrote it, well, I turned this into right recursion, and because it's right recursion, that B that I have up here has to appear before I start doing all the A's. Otherwise, there's no way I'm ever going to get that B in the very first position. So in general, if we have A goes to A alpha or beta, so this can be rewritten just like we saw before here. So that becomes A goes to beta A. Now, A prime, and then keep in mind here when I abstract the A and the B into a beta and an alpha, those alphas and betas can be anything, right? They can be a single terminal, or it can be some non-terminals, or they can be epsilons. All we have to do is when we try to solve a problem where we have to get rid of left recursion and turn it into right recursion, is we take the rule that we have and we just match it to this pattern here, and then follow this rewriting technique. And it's super simple, and it's one of these things, you just go and learn this because it's probably going to be on the final and the midterm. We have to speak about midterms before we leave. It's really not all that hard to memorize this. Hmm?
And the comp.
And
The comp.
oh yes, well, that too.
Oh,
So we want the recursion to be on the right now, like that, and we need an epsilon here, which means that we'll just repeat alphas as many as we need right there. Now, of course, we can be. Actually, let me just draw a line here. We can be even more general, because what if we had something that looked like, I don't know how we ended up doing things in red, but okay, it is what it is. What if I had something that looked like this? So it's A alpha 1, A alpha 2, dot, 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 A alpha n. So I have n recursive cases, and then I have a number of non-recursive cases. So these are sort of like the B's in the example above. If I take that and I massage it a little bit, that's basically the same as doing this. Well, I know that all of these left recurse on A, so I'm just going to lift that A out and put the choice of the alphas in there. And then it's then a choice of, and I'm just putting these brackets around, which of course doesn't mean anything. It's just so that I can see what sort of belongs together, right? I have that. This, if I just treat that as an alpha, and I treat that as a beta, then what do I have? Now I have a recursive left on A followed by an alpha or a beta. Wait a minute, that's just this thing here, right? So we'll do that on the next page. So that just becomes A goes to a choice of beta to begin with, because as we can see here, when this recursion terminates, it's got to end by taking one of these betas. So any string generated from this grammar starts with one of the beta guys. All right, and once I've done that, then I can now recurse and make alphas. So that just follows the same recipe. Like this. The only thing that might be important to just note here is that whenever you recurse and you have to pick an alpha, you don't have to pick the same alpha. And if you look here, this A, when it recurses, doesn't require that you always follow a recursion on the same rule. So you could go A goes to A alpha 1, and then that A goes to A alpha 2. So you can get as many alphas in any order of any kind as you want. Okay. Right, so let's just try to do let's do an example. Let's do example 4.6, and in there I have something that looks like E goes to E plus B or B, and we can see that we clearly have here left recursion, right? So all we really have to do now is just identify what's the A's, what's the alphas, what's the betas, and what's the A primes. Well, the A primes come out automatically, so we'll just try to do this. We'll see. Well, it's E recursing on E, so this E has to play the role of the A. This must play the role of the alpha, and this must be the beta. So I know that I should get A goes to beta A prime goes to alpha A prime or epsilon. Which is, well, let's see, the A was just an E, so I get E goes to, and then beta was the little b, and then I get E, or alpha, I'm going to call it E prime just because it looks nicer. And E prime is, well, it's alpha, and alpha was plus b, so you can see here's one of the situations where alpha is more than just one thing. And then I get the recursive one again, like that, or an epsilon. Okay, let's do one that's just slightly more complicated. I'd like just to get to a point where you can just take one quick look at it and you can do it in your head without having to identify too much. E plus B or E minus C, B, C. So if we look at that real quick, we can say, all right, that's the A, that's the A, this is an alpha 0, that's an A, that's alpha 1, this is beta 1, that's beta 0 and beta 1. So we get, and that's just the red stuff up here on the left hand side, we get E goes to a choice of the betas, so that's a B or C, E prime, and E prime goes to, so now I have a choice of plus B or minus C on E prime or epsilon. So we get that, and I don't think anybody has much problem doing that. So what we can do here is we can just say, note, this was direct left recursion. Direct left recursion is easy, but what if we have indirect left recursion? That can be done. If you want to do that, then it's C algorithm 5 plus example 4.7. I'm not going to ask you to do an indirect left recursion elimination just because the grammar just tends to be big and clunky and weird and non-intuitive when you're done with it. So you might have seen it actually in 456, which is the place you probably would see something like that. But nevertheless, here's something I will ask you to do. So 4, 3, 2, which is common sub-expressions. Now this is best illustrated with an example, 4.8. And it goes something like A goes to... It just occurred to me, why is my iPad actually turned this way and not the other way? I mean, why are we doing this in landscape mode?
I don't know. That was kind of what you did.
No, I think that's what you told me to do many years ago when we started this.
Fix the screen. Well, because I figured you'd want a whiteboard, not a piece of paper.
Oh. Okay then. Yeah, why stop now? No, it just occurred to me because on this page I divided it into two. Well, nah, never mind. That theory didn't hold much water. A, B, C, or A, B, D, D. Is it context-free? Yes, because it's written as a context-free grammar. Is it LL1? My monitor is in landscape mode, that's true, but I don't take up the entire monitor. Because if I did, then I couldn't see what you typed to me. So what do we think? Is this LL1? Well, we can try to compute. First of A, B, this is actually a capital C, not that it matters much. And we can compute the first of A, B, D, D. Oops, I missed out a C on this one, right? Well, that first set is an A. This first set is an A. The intersection of those is not empty, therefore not LL1. Right? So is it LL1? No. Well, it's not LL1 because any string that comes from here starts with an A and there as well. Actually, any string that comes from here starts with AB, and any string that comes from here starts with AB. So we would have to look ahead at least 3 characters or 3 tokens in order to figure out whether a string that starts with AB came from ABC or ABDD. Can anybody tell me, under which circumstances would you have to look further ahead than 3 tokens in order to determine if the input string came from ABC or ABDD? No takers? What's the first set of C? Capital C. Well, we don't know. But can you tell me what definitely cannot be in the first set of capital C if I want this grammar to be LL3? Yeah, so the first of C cannot, well, not equal to D, but cannot include it or contain it, right? So the first of capital C cannot contain a little d. Yeah, oh yeah, that's what you said. That's what that thing is. Yeah. Oh, the Commodore logo almost. Yeah. So if that D is in, yeah, so we can just note here. If D is not in the first of C, then we might be LL3. Now, what we can do is we can just say, well, we know that any string that starts with that comes from an A starts with little a, little b, right? So how about we do it this way then? So this goes to definitely AB, and then I'll change my, or I'll make up my mind once I've cleared that hurdle. So that becomes either, well, that's again, it's a capital C or little d, d. And now it's much easier to see that if C can start with little d, then we have a problem again, right? So if we want to do this sort of in a general manner, then if we have, oh, let's do that on the next page actually, because that takes up a little bit more space. So we can try to do something where we say A goes to alpha A1, alpha A2 dot dot dot, alpha AN, and then we say that alpha is the longest common prefix. So it just means that if I look at this example that we had here before, the alpha that I'd be looking at here is AB, because the longest common prefix is AB on both of these, right? So I can't just say, oh, I'm going to take that one. If I do, then I'm going to have to repeat it all over again with the B. So we'll just say that alpha is the longest common prefix. Then we can write that A goes to alpha A prime. A prime is now just A1 dot 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 AN. Right, so it's written slightly differently in the book, but it's exactly the same problem. So I really I expect you to be able to do these without any problems. 433 is grammar ambiguities, which I think you might have talked about in 456. That's a hard one to spell. Right, again, nothing illustrates the point like an example. So here's a grammar, and I bet you've seen this one before. Right. So it should be reasonably clear that we can generate any expression here with pluses and minuses and IDs. So can I do, for example, the following? So a leftmost derivation of ID plus ID plus ID. So E plus E. Leftmost derivation, so that one I picked. Now I pick this one, and I get ID plus E. And we pick that one. Now we gotta make that into an E plus E. And we get ID plus ID plus E. Oh, and then we get ID. I want to fit it onto the screen here. It did. There we go. So here we pick this one, here we pick that one, and then we're done. Right, and we've already seen how the derivation drives the building of the parse tree. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this stuff here and just put it here. And oops, there. And then I'll draw the parse tree down here. Let's see. Trees are green, right? So it looks something like this. There's an E at the top that gets replaced by an E plus an E. This left E gets replaced by an identifier, this gets replaced by an E plus an E, an identifier, and identifier. Right. So what if I had done it this way instead? E goes to, and look, I'm going to do a leftmost derivation again, so it's not like I'm switching to a rightmost derivation or anything, although that shouldn't make any difference whatsoever, right? That one, I'm going to make that E plus E this time, and I already had an E. So now it's this guy. And I get ID plus E plus E. And now I get ID plus ID plus E. And I finally get ID plus ID plus ID. And that was that E. Now it's this E, and it's that E. And let's see. That E became E plus E. So good so far. Then this E now became, oops, this E became this stuff, right? Because that one there is that one. Well, that means this guy now looks like this. And then eventually they all became IDs. Those are not the same, which I think you probably already knew and you've seen this grammar, right? So which one is the correct one? Both are correct. No, we can't have that. Both with an F. What do you mean? All right, well, so if you want to be pedantic about it, redo, replace plus by minus. Okay? And then you're deriving ID minus ID minus ID, and you get so I'm just doing the abbreviated parse tree here. Now, with virtual brackets, this one on the left is what? Well, it's ID minus ID minus ID. And this one here is ID minus ID minus ID. If I'm not mistaken, that's equivalent to ID minus ID plus ID. That ain't right, right? This is much better. See, he looks much happier too. So it's troublesome because we had two different leftmost derivations that could generate both of them. So from the point of view of which one is the correct one, they were all both correct because they were choices that I made using the grammar. But the problem is that the grammar is not good, right? So if we think about this a little more, if I had ID minus ID minus ID minus ID minus ID minus ID, how should that tree look? Well, it's equivalent to ID minus ID minus ID minus ID, etc. Right? So I probably want something like ID minus ID minus ID minus ID minus ID, because these guys are grouped together, and it's this guy. These ones make up that thing, and so on, right? So if I were to do something that had only one E, so we want to rewrite E goes to, I'm just going to do it for E minus E, and then we can come back and do the same with plus, right? It's just it's a little harder to see with plus because things don't go bad. We need to rewrite that so that it forces recursion only. It forces the kind of recursion that creates a tree that sort of hangs off to the left. So should we recurse on this guy or should we recurse on that guy? Well, we've if we go back and look here, this is the one where I recursed on this one and it gave me that one there. So obviously this should be to something that looks like E goes to E minus, and now it's going to be something that's not an E here. I'm just going to call it an F, and then I'm going to say F goes to ID. Now, of course, if you don't want any minus stuff, then you should be able to take the shortcut straight to just an F. So we get something like this, right? So E plus E or E minus E or ID becomes E goes to E plus F or E minus F or ID, and then F goes to, oops, or just F, and F goes to ID, which of course is left recursive. So we got to get that out of there. But I think we can probably do that by using the algorithm that we just derived 2 pages back. So we get E goes to, let's see, actually, shall I mark this up just so that it becomes, let's see, here's the recursion. So this is A, this is A, this is A, this is alpha 1, alpha 2, and beta. So I get, maybe not in that color, I get F E prime. E prime is plus F E prime or minus F E prime or epsilon, and F goes to ID. Right? I think they all left because nobody's saying anything. Should we go as well?
We could.
Yeah. I could eat a sandwich now. Should we go get a sandwich? Well, I don't think they're gonna. Oh, are you sure? Oh, damn, they're still here. Oh, they're still here. Damn. So we can. Yes, unfortunately, because we were all like, Alex was very excited about it. You just have to say sandwich. I mean, it's like a little dog, and it starts wagging. It starts wagging its tail. Yeah, no, I was like, sandwich, sandwich. Right.
Said the magic word.
Yeah, that's right. No, it hurts him. It hurts him down into his soul that the Jimmy John's across the street is not currently in operation. Right.
Into my pillow. That's shaped after Jimmy John's.
Aren't there some grammar ambiguities that cannot be fixed and that the compiler just forces the parse tree in a certain direction? No. We shouldn't have any situations. Well, so it depends on what you mean by that. If the grammar is LL1, no, that's not the case, because if a grammar is LL1, then you can always parse the grammar correctly by using left to right derivation, left to right scanning of the input, and one look ahead. Are there some grammars that are not LL1? Yes. there are certainly grammars that are not LL1, and there are grammars that cannot be massaged into becoming LL1 because they're too complex. They just belong to a different class of grammars, and they might be SLR parsable or LR parsable, and they may not. But we'll come to those a little bit later. But there is another problem because what about operator precedence? And let's see, do I have no, I don't have an example, but I can make one. Because if I go like this, it's very simple. If we had this, then we rewrite like we did on the previous page. That just becomes E goes to, that's a poor F, F E prime goes to plus E no, that's not right. What did we do here? We said what did we do? Plus F E prime plus, oops, plus F E prime multiply F, yeah, now it's working. Or epsilon, and then F is just ID. Right, wonderful. Is that any good? Right, now we could try to do that thing again, where we where I say something like, let's see, what do I want to do? I want to do the following. Just gonna make sure we get it right. So ID plus ID multiplied by ID. What's that tree gonna look like? Well, I can derive it. So I can derive it by saying E goes to F E prime goes to ID E prime goes to ID plus F E prime ID plus ID E prime. These are leftmost derivations, of course. So we get something like this. What does the tree look like for that? Oh, well, let's see. It's an E with an ID and an E prime that consists of a plus and an F and an E prime. That F is an ID. That E prime is a what is that E prime? That's how far are we down now? That becomes a multiplication. F E prime ID epsilon. Yeah, this becomes this is a little hard to read, isn't it? But this actually looks correct. Can we do the other one? What about ID multiplied by ID plus ID? Try to do that one, and then we get a similar tree, but that means ID plus ID is tied together, and that's wrong, right? Am I sure it's correct? No, probably not. F goes to ID Where did I skip f goes to id? First left branch. E goes to f e prime, f goes to e goes to f e prime. That f goes to an id, that's good. That e goes to plus f e prime. Oh, right, yes. Fair enough. It doesn't change anything really, so I need an f there and an id there. Good, thank you, yes. I got it, yeah. So if I do it again, then I get something that hangs off like that, and that's not correct. I get a problem, right? So that means we get a problem. Now this is easily solved. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do it exactly the way that it's sort of done in the you've seen this in the COP file, right? We sort of cascade things depending on precedence. And basically, if we have a high precedence, then the rule is going to be lower in the grammar. And if it's a low precedence, then it's going to be higher. So for example, if we say something like this, so if I have precedence level 1, 2, and 3, and I have just plus and minus, they have the same precedence, and then next up is those, and at the highest is something like that, right? Then I can write a grammar that looks, well, let's just start with one where we don't have division and multiplication. So I have e goes to e plus e, or e mult e, or bracketed e, or id. And we know how to deal with those ambiguity issues. And what we need to do is we need to do a cascading grammar where the pluses and minuses are at the top. Well, actually, we know how to solve this with respect to ambiguities. So we get, if we want the lowest precedent operator to be at the top, then I have to say e goes to e plus t. Now I need an extra level because I have two precedence levels that are higher. So I'm going to use t, e minus t, or t if I don't want any pluses or minuses. And at the t level, I'll multiply t's and f's divided, or just an f. And an f is either a bracketed e or an identifier. Okay? Now, this we know how to fix, because this just becomes e goes to t f, oh, t e prime. E prime is plus t e prime, or minus t e prime, or epsilon. T is f t prime. T prime is multiply f t prime, divide f t prime, or an epsilon, and f retains the shape that it had before and just becomes that. And this grammar we'll play with a lot, so you'll get to see that one again. So everybody with me so far? So when we want to implement precedence levels, then we just you can see what we did here. We have, so level 1 is here, and here, level 2 here and here, level 3 here, right? So if I said, oh, I want to put in, if I wanted to put in something between level 2 and 3, well, we could actually, no, you can go and try that yourself. Then we can talk about it next time if anybody has any questions. Let's say that I wanted to put in what has higher precedence than, oh, actually, so let's give it a go, just for fun. You only live once. Don't ask why the path looks the way it does here. So that's what we ended up with. So now we can say, can we find an operator that has precedence level 2.5? Why did you do the one on the right again? E goes to T E prime. Where? Here? Alexis, were you okay with it, or did the gotcha mean that you got it? Yeah, I don't want that negative one, because negative looks like minus. We're gonna make something up. I have an idea. Okay. What about what if we just throw in exponentiation using, and I'm just going to use this one. I know it's XOR, and it always screws people up. So, for example, if I did something like that, then we can probably say that that goes in between 2 and 3, doesn't it? Well, we can decide that. I mean, it's a good idea to keep the math rules and the rules from other languages, just so you don't confuse people. I mean, very few people would probably pick up a language in which you said, yeah, if you just write without any brackets, then minus has the highest, precedence level. So that's not good. So let's add level 2.5 to be that guy. Okay, so basically all that means is, I'm just going to make a copy of this grammar here. All that means is that if I could take this F guy and just sort of scrounge down a little bit here, we'll put him there. And then we need, how about P for exponentiation? So P goes to something, something. Actually, probably not. Let's see. We need to get rid of our F's, don't we? Because our F's now have to be replaced by P's. So if we can do that. We need that F to go, that F, and that F. And I didn't want that to turn into that. So then I'm going to put a P, a P, and a P. Right? And that P looks like, should we do that in red, actually? So E goes to TE prime, T goes to PT prime, P goes to FP prime, P prime goes to this one, and if we look up here, that was the same there, this is the same here, so that's got to be the same there as well. So this is going to say FP prime or F. And then I think that's about right, isn't it? So let's see, can I do just id to the power of id? So can we derive? Let's just try. I think we can. It's just e goes to t e prime goes to p t prime e prime goes to f p prime t prime e prime goes to id p prime t prime e prime. These tend to get a little stupid long. id p prime goes to that, f p prime t prime e prime. Yeah, we're good. id goes to id p prime t prime e prime goes to id t prime e prime. Now I just pick epsilon transitions, and remember those epsilon transitions basically are just there to stop me from grouping things and go back to the precedence level above. You can see that I could have used these guys to produce plus and oh yes, epsilon. That should be an epsilon. There you go. Thank you. These guys I used to, if I wanted to add or multiply things up there, right? Oh no, it didn't. Yeah. There we go. How's that? Right. All right. So, not too terribly complicated if you actually pay attention and don't screw around. Right. So now 4.4 recursive descent. Parsing. Parsing so simple that you could write a program to write the parser for you. Right. So this is something where it's called recursive descent because we're going to end up writing. We write many mutually recursive procedures. One for each non-terminal. So can we do a really, really simple example? Here's a language, and it looks like this, right? So could I write a procedure that is called parse A that recognizes this language? So let's write void parse A. So far, so good. That wasn't hard, right? There's a one-to-one correspondence between the capital A and void parse underscore A curly bracket with brackets, open bracket, close bracket, curly bracket, open. Okay. Now, what should I do? What's the first step I should do in order to parse A, B, C? Well, it should probably be to match some input, right? So if I just say match A, and we can maybe say here that, well, so first of all, this is really a token, right? It's just easier here to look at it as a string or a character or something. So it's really a token. And this reads and matches A from input. Okay. then I should probably do a match B and a match C. And if I really want to be pedantic, I should check that we're at the end of the file. So we can then say something like, if, what do I do now? Well, I want to actually look at the look ahead. So the next thing on the input, let's call that the look ahead. So that's the next token on input. And it's updated by match. So every time match eats something off of the input, it updates the look ahead to be the next thing. So if the look ahead is not end of file, we can produce some error that says too much input. Okay. Everybody okay with that? Not too terribly complicated, right? Let's make it more complicated. I'm going to do the following just because if I have recursion on A recursing on itself, then this check becomes impossible because I don't know when I'm supposed to be at the end. So it's always nice to have a start symbol that exists only once on the left-hand side. So this is a unique start non-terminal. Okay, what if I say A, capital A, little b, and capital A is C or D? Okay, well, we know sort of how to handle some of it at least. So we can say void parse S. In order to progress, we have to match an A here. And then we've got to parse something created by an A. But if I create a parse function for every non-terminal, then I could just call it here, can't I? And then hope that it will deal with things. So if I ever come back from that function, then what's the next thing I should expect on the input? Well, it certainly is a B, isn't it? So I can now just say match B. And now I can say if the look ahead is not end of file, then some error, right? And just to be on the safe side, this thing here only in the start non-terminals procedure. So we only do it for that very start terminal, right? Sorry, start non-terminal, because all programs from this grammar are derived from an S, and they start with an A and then something and end in a B, and then after here we only expect to see end of file, right? Right, so now so we don't have to check for end of file down at the bottom of this one, because we only do that in that start one. Well, what do I do now? I need to read either a C or a D. If I say match C and there's a C on the input, that's fine. If I say match C and there's a D on the input, then we get an error. If I say match D on the and there's a C on the input, we get an error. And if I say match D and there's a D on the input, then we're fine. But both C and D should work. So is there some way that we can sort of disambiguate which of the two that we're using, C or D? Well, we could just look at the input, right? We have the next input available in look ahead, so we can just say if the look ahead is a C, then match a C. Else, if the look ahead is a D, match D, else error. And if it's not a C and if it's not a D, reminder, you said you wanted to talk about the midterm before the end of the class. Yes, I did. And we will in just a second. I just want to finish this off here real quick. So this is completely determined by the right hand sides, right? If it's that one, then we do this. If it's this one, then we do this. Now, what about, and this is not an S, if I say S, that's the one where we check for end of file. What if I have something that looks like this? So this and these are non-terminals. All right, well, void parse A. Now, if it had just been A goes to B, then I could have just said, oh, well, go on parse B because that's the only option you have. But now I have a number of options. I could either go on parse B, I can go on parse C, or I can match little d. I could certainly do something where I say, well, if the look ahead is a little d, then match that, so that's fine. But when should I go and call parse B, and when should I go and call parse C? So when do we match D? When the look ahead is D. When do we call parse B? When do we call parse C? Can I say anything about the look ahead with respect to when I should call parse B and when I should call parse C? I've talked too much. I'm not even through my coffee yet. I think you people are sleeping today. Well, so the quicker we get this part over with, the quicker we can talk. So for C, when the look ahead is C, no. C is not a terminal. C is a non-terminal. Look, non-terminal. Otherwise, it's too easy, right? I'm not trying to make it easy for you. So what doesn't this need to be LL1, not left recursive? Yeah, sure. Yeah, that is an uppercase C. There we go. So, but what do you know about the next? So the next thing on the input is the look ahead, right? If that look ahead, let's say that it's a little a for the sake of argument. Then what I can do is I can look at my grammar here and I say, well, can the rule for B generate strings that start with a little a, and can the rule for C generate strings that start with a little a? If neither of them can, then we have a problem, because then I cannot generate a string that starts with an A if B can't and C can't and D isn't an A. What if B can generate strings that start with an A and C can't? Well, then we can just call parse B, because we know that if it's generatable, then it came from there. What if both B and C can? Well, now we have a problem, because I can only look ahead one, and all I can see is that A, so we're in trouble. Now, how do I know if B can generate strings that start with a little a? How do I know that? Yeah, we just check out the first test, right? So when do we match D? So when do we match B? When the look ahead is in the first of B. When the look ahead is in the first of C. And now, of course, you can see here, right, that if these two guys have anything in common, or both of them have a D in, well, or either of them have a D in, then if I see a D in the input, I don't know where it came from. And if I see anything that these guys have in common, then I don't know where that came from either. So we can certainly say here, if D is not in the first of B, D is not in the first of C, first of B has nothing in common with the first of D, then we can do this. So we can say if the look ahead is in the first of B, parse B, else if the look ahead is in the first of C, parse C, else if the look ahead is a D, match that D, else error it's a wonderful error message, unexpected token. Something like this, right? B, something in common with first of C. Yes, thank you. There we go. Right. So I'm gonna just well, I suppose we can, since nobody can view our videos anyways. Why do we not do an end of file test? Because, as I said, it's not the starting term symbol here. So we can just say here, note A is not the start. I don't want to have to do that end of file test for all my small little examples. So we'll put in a rule that says all my starting symbol or all my starting non-terminals are called S, and only if it's called S is it the starting one. Otherwise, it's just a fragmented grammar, and we don't need to do the end of file. We only ever expect to see the end of file after we've parsed the entire right-hand side of a non-terminal on the left that doesn't appear on the right of anything, right? That's the way we do it. So only if it's specifically said that the left-hand side is the starting non-terminal do we do the end of file test. Otherwise, we don't. And nowhere in the book do I do it except for when that's mentioned, because it's sort of a pain to write down all the time. So it looks like we can do this actually. So there's nothing different between this test, and this test, right? Because it just happens that the first of D is D. So this really just says if the first set of D has nothing in common with the first set of B, and the first set of D doesn't have anything in common with the first set of C, and the first set of B doesn't have anything in common with the first set of C. So it does that check, and that check. Actually, so the first check is this one, second check is this one, and then the third check is that one, right? So it looks like we can do this fairly easily if these guys have nothing in common in their first sets when I look at those intersections pairwise. But we're going to run into some interesting problems when we get epsilons into the first sets, because that causes a lot of hoo-ha. We'll look at that next time. So midterm, we got to do that at some point, I guess. When should we do that? So we were, what did you guys say we were? How far in now? 6 out of something. Well, so here's the thing, right? We do have to do it, but you don't have to do it, because I will honor my normal rule that says if you do better on the final than you do on the midterm, then your final grade will count 50% instead of 40, and the midterm will just disappear. But if you take the midterm and you do better on the midterm than you do on the final, then your midterm counts 10% and your final counts 40%. So if you don't take the midterm, then you'd be hard-pressed to do worse on the final, because I can't award you negative points. That just means that that your final will count 50% if you don't take the midterm. So it is your choice. Will you give us midterm answers after the midterm? Maybe I'll make a video or something. Okay, October 13th is fine. October 13th?
Sure.
Okay. Alex says sure. That means he has to remember it now. Because I will probably forget. But that's all right. We can do that.
That's the midterm, you said?
The week after handing in phase 3. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. All right, October 13th. Anything else? Or can I bugger off and do something else? Is it in person? No, you can't. You can't come. Yeah, I don't want to see you people. It's going to be on here. It's going to be on WebEx, and it's going to be just for the. It's going to be just open for an hour and 15 minutes or whatever. So we'll do it while we're all here. Yeah, well, I'm not gonna waste anybody's time or money on this lockdown stuff because it's a pain in the ass. So that just means you can't cheat and do bad things, because that would be bad. Did we decide on phase 3 between the 6th and the 13th? No, we decided on phase 3 on the 6th, actually, but nice try. We'll talk about it next week, but get some work done on that, because I have from reliable sources that phase 2 was less than stellar. And if things are already going down on phase 2, then I am already scared about phase 6. So up and at 'em, George McFadden, as they say in Britain. Right. I am. So we will. You will proctor through WebEx. Yeah, you can all turn your web cameras on and not stare at you or something. We'll figure it out. We did it. We did it with the exam last year. It worked just fine. So I will see you guys on. No, I'm not going to get beer. I have to do another lecture now. Do you think that I just sit around and lounge? Now I've got another one lined up that's starting in like 10 minutes. You know, I barely have time to. Well, don't worry about it. I don't really want to look at you anyways. I mean, Irish coffee. Yeah, that would be all right. I suppose that would be nice if Starbucks would start serving that. But I suppose you can't drink and drive. Drive and drink Irish coffee at the same time. Anyways, I'm out of here. See you guys later. Have a good weekend. Bye.